Well, howdy, g'day, and welcome to Driveway Time. COVID is still around. The economic crisis is still here. 8 of my 9 companies are still trading. And I think that there's a lot to be done and a lot we can get through. But ultimately, we can survive through this thing. 90-day plan is what I've been teaching all along. We're now almost... we're 3 weeks into quarantine here at our house, so 4 weeks since I first started teaching about this. And if we all understand that, our basic goal is to get a 90-day plan in place to get through the 90 days of the worst of this thing. Obviously some markets are going to be a little bit longer and some markets way less. I start looking at some of the markets where they've had almost no impact, but the economic impact is going to be here. So sanity through this whole thing is probably one of the biggest points that I think we've got to look at, because very simply put, there is the longer this thing goes, the harder it is to stay sane. Oh, thanks for typing in where you're at there, Paul. Good reminder for me to tell everyone, especially those of you new to Drive Time, we all type in where we're at. And I know this is Driveway Time right now, not Drive Time, but anyway, that's the fun part of it. So keeping your sanity about you right now, first and foremost, you've got to understand that phase 1 is survive, phase 2 is come out of this thing strong. If we understand that survival is phase 1, then what we need to do is learn how to survive, pivot to survive. And, most of the people who have been following me since this are definitely... how should I put this? Most people following me are definitely getting through the survive stuff. If you haven't done my 10-day course on this that I just recorded, please jump online, get that, and follow that. But if you understand that there is a survival mode and then there's a thrive, you got to come out of this thing strong. You can't just think of surviving the whole thing. You've got to actually pivot. If you're going to come out of this with some level of sanity, you've got to pivot to a point where you know my goal is to come out of this thing stronger than I went into it. My goal is to get myself in a better position than when I went into this thing. Coming out of it strong should be the goal, not just survival the whole way through. Second thing I think you've got to do if you want to get through this thing with any level of sanity is start to give yourself mental breaks, okay? Give yourself times where you take time out, time off, because most people are now working from home or doing something like that, so there's no break between the two, especially if you've never worked from home. It's very tough, and especially if you're working from the kitchen table or somewhere that's just something where you're at. You've got to give yourself time to get that, and, if you can get out and take a walk, if you can get and do some exercise in your backyard, get a jump rope, do something. But getting yourself a mental break, and even if it's a day here or half a day there, if you want to get through this thing with sanity, you must give yourself some form of mental break, and it has to happen as regular as you find yourself needing it. Don't burn the candle at both ends to get through this. Right in the beginning, and I said this to all of you in the beginning, you're going to have to double down for a week or two. Now, if you're right in the beginning now and you've got to double down for a week or two, then yeah, you got to do that. But to get through this 90 days with some level of sanity, you're going to need to take mental breaks. And again, I keep using the term 90 days because that's my best guess. I don't have a better guess than 90 days for this thing. And that's the thing. I was chatting on a webinar late last evening, and I was asked, what do I see in the cycle of this thing? How do I see the cycle of this economically? Well, if you take a look at most downturns in an economy, most economic downturns actually take 6 to 12 months to happen. Like 2008 probably is the best example of people debated for a while, is it a negative economy? Well, what we know about this one is we know it's a negative economy. We know that. It's plain and obvious as the day is long. It was... So the crash is already there. Now, will we have are we in the middle of a dead cat bounce? Maybe. Maybe there's another leg down on the stock market. Maybe there's not. I guess it's going to be determined in a few weeks. And that's why I'm still watching at that sort of stuff. I've been in and out of the markets, but not firmly committed one way or the other. I'm still very much a cash believer at this point. Very much a believer in that right now. That being said, those mental breaks are a big part of getting you through this, even though I see the cycle being shorter than most negative economic cycles, because it's not a whole economic downturn. You got to remember, a third of the businesses out there right now are in absolute boom. A third of the businesses are in absolute boom. Yes, a third are fully shut down. Now, interestingly enough, that third that are fully shut down, in many countries, and especially here in the US, I see it in Australia, a little bit in the UK, Canada, fairly well in New Zealand, a lot of countries around the world. What I'm seeing is those that are fully shut down will get bailout. Okay, and so you've got to remember that if those that were shut down get bailout, those in the middle like me that have found a way to pivot, hustle, do something to make money in all of our companies, and then you've got the companies, a third of them that are on boom. One of my companies, thank goodness, the commercial cleaning business. But you sit back and you start thinking about what it is that's going to come out of this whole thing, and that's why I believe the cycle will pivot back. We'll go down through fall, through an economic winter, but we'll come back pretty quickly, in my opinion. Now, I could be wrong, and I might be able to. I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong when I am, so I'll take that on board and see how it goes. But at this stage, I see us about a 90 days. Okay. Now, third thing I think we've got to do to get through this economic crisis is mentally get through this economic crisis is you've got to keep learning and growing. You can't sit where you're at. You've got to keep learning, keep growing. And again, that's why I put on my training course and my 30X. We knocked that down to $99 for people to be able to go and do a 30-day training with me. But if you keep learning and you keep growing through this thing, you come out of it better. Business doesn't get easier. You become a better business person. Life doesn't get easier. You just have to get better at life. There's nothing in the world that'll ever get easier. You've got to just keep getting better at it. And I think that's one of the big things, the sanity through this thing. And I know for a fact that, as we get deeper into this thing, it's sometimes harder to stay focused. Once you've sort of survived that first week or 2 weeks of absolute insanity, it's like, oh, well, okay, now I can sort of backpedal. No, you've got to get in growth mode right now. You've got to get into that growth and growing your knowledge, growing the business. You've got to set some new goals, and that's the thing. You've got to have something to focus for. Like I taught in the other day, it's very important to... how should I put this? It's very important to be seen as a leader, and it's very important as a leader to give people something to focus on. But you also have to give yourself something to focus on. You also must give yourself some goals. And, it wouldn't be a bad thing right now to give yourself some personal goals, a fitness goal, a weight goal, a learning goal, or something to do to keep your sanity amongst all of this craziness, okay? Fourth and final thing I'm going to say to get yourself through this in a sane methodology is see yourself as the helper in this thing. Who can you help? Is there a friend of yours that you haven't called in a while that you need to reach out to? Be the reach out person. Be that person that emails, texts, calls, FaceTimes, does that stuff. If you are the person that's always calling people and saying, hey, just checking in how you're doing. Hey, just seeing how you're doing. Remember that one of the biggest ways to feel better about ourselves is to give. And in this time, some of us can give financially, some of us can give time-wise, but the one thing you can definitely give is a phone call. So do that with your staff, do it with your customers, do it with your friends, do it with everybody you can. But keeping your sanity about you is a very big part of it. So for those of you that are new to drive time or driveway time as it is right now, we type in our biggest lesson at the end of it. So what's your biggest learning? What are you going to take action on today? So make sure you do. Take care. Look forward to chatting to you again tomorrow. Bye for now.